All right. Welcome in, everybody. This is Biscuits and SEC Live. I'm Hammer. That is Bossman, a.k.a. Hank and Alex. Welcome in. We are back for our 25th show. So appreciate y'all tuning in, following along, and watching our videos. As always, please consider subscribing to the newsletter. We've got the link down below, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter. Goes out once a week right now on Wednesdays during the football season. It'll be bi-weekly on Mondays and Fridays. So it's free. We just bring you all the SEC and college sports news that is worth knowing about. So hope you'll consider that. Give us a like on the video, subscribe to our YouTube, social media, etc. We got a good show for you tonight. We're going to be talking second weekend of March Madness, Sweet 16, Elite 8, featured a ton of SEC teams. Some coaching carousel stuff with the Buzz Williams news to Maryland. We'll touch on the women's Final Four as well, as the stage is set there for, I think those games actually start Friday ahead of the men's. So anyway, let's get to it. Bossman, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. It was a good second weekend of the tournament. We'll get into it more, but just not a whole lot of upsets this year, both in the men's and the women's tournaments. You got, in the women's side, you got 3 number 1 seeds and a number 2 seed, and then you got all 4 number 1 seeds making it to the Final Four this year for the men. So lots to talk about on tonight's show. Looking forward to it. Everything is good here in Texas. We got nothing to complain about. Weather's finally warming up. We got baseball on, all sorts of fun stuff going on. So looking forward to a good show.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the SEC baseball has been awesome. Not really for A&M fans like yourself and I, as we are 1-8 in the SEC, but around the league, it's impressive. We don't even have this on our, run sheet tonight to talk about, but just real quick, the current top 10, according to D1 Baseball, which is, in my opinion, basically the authority on college baseball. They do an excellent job over there. Tennessee, number 1, Arkansas, number 2, Georgia, number 3, Texas, number 5, LSU, number 7, Bama, number 8, Ole Miss, number 9, and Oklahoma, number 10. So 8 of the 10 in the top 10 are in the SEC. The only 2 that aren't are number 4, Florida State, and number 6, Clemson. So very exciting year across the Southeastern Conference on the baseball diamond, again, with the exception of A&M.
Yeah, A&M is fast becoming a trivia question this season. They still have a little bit of runway, long season, but 1-8 in the SEC, they have to really turn it around and go on a basically generational run in order to make the postseason at this point. But yeah, other than A&M, the conference is extraordinarily strong this year, as was expected, and SEC baseball has been good for a long time, but now with the basketball doing so well, creating, getting the record number in the tournament, record number in the Sweet 16. This is no longer just a football conference, and it's still the strongest football conference if you ask any of us SEC fans, and I think most of you watching would agree with us there, though Ohio State won the most recent national championship, top to bottom. I think the SEC, most would say, is still the most dominant football conference in the country, but not just a football conference anymore. With the new iteration of the SEC, you've got baseball, basketball, football, and even women's basketball now, very strong top to bottom. So it's a fun time, awesome time to be in the SEC and enjoying SEC sports.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hop into that, though, the tournament, right? So as you said, there was a record number of SEC teams playing this past, I guess, Thursday and Friday in the Sweet 16. And we're not going to touch on all the games because some of them were not so great. But, like, for instance, Auburn, Michigan, it was a good game, competitive game that tall Larry Bird looking fella from Michigan kind of kept him in it, but Auburn kind of controlled that game. Johni Broome, 22 points, 16 rebounds, ended up winning by 10. But in the same regional, Michigan State, Ole Miss. What did you think of that game? That game was really fun, close, back and forth, and ultimately the Rebels just couldn't quite get it done in the end against Tom Izzo, an experienced Michigan State team.
Yeah, a couple just quick things on that one. You had I remember I said this last week as we were heading into weekend 2, there was a clip of Tom Izzo in a post-game interview talking, and they were asking him, okay, like with this one behind you, you're looking ahead. You've got Chris Beard and the Ole Miss Rebels coming up. What's your read on them? What's your take on them? And, he basically said, let me enjoy this one before I have to think about Chris Beard, because I have played Chris Beard and I know that, his teams are always ready to go. They're always solid and they're always tough to beat. And he was right. Right. We saw that Ole Miss played them tough. Ole Miss had them on the ropes. And Sean Padula, man, what a game. That guy is just a gamer, total baller, had, I think it was 24 points, and had Ole Miss right there on the edge, on the verge of taking out a 2 seed in Michigan State. Just at the end of the day, a couple more points just weren't able to get it done. But awesome game to watch.
Yeah, that really was a good game. Moving down the bracket, Florida handled business against Maryland. We don't need to touch on that, especially given the Elite Eight game that they played. Tennessee and Kentucky is probably worth talking about a little bit, although Tennessee kind of handled their business there, right? They end up winning 78-65, were in control most of the game. They got revenge, so Kentucky beat them twice in the regular season, as we know. So got the win when it mattered in the tournament, thanks to an 18-point, 10-assist game from Zakai Ziegler, who I believe is done now at Tennessee with eligibility, which is a shame because that guy, fun to watch, complete gamer. He's not very big, so he's kind of undersized, especially for like the next level, but super fun to watch and had a great career at Tennessee. I know Vol fans will miss him. But anything you want to point out there? I know that game was highly anticipated, but maybe didn't quite live up to the expectation.
Yeah, not too much to point out there. Tennessee, like you said, they handled their business. One thing I'll just note on Kentucky is that I think Kentucky fans are happy, I guess, maybe is the right word. They're okay with this first season under Mark Pope. And okay, you get a 3 seed, you make it to the Sweet 16. All right. Nice first season, but now it gets real. And going into year 2 and on down the line, he's going to be expected to make it much further than Sweet 16s. We need to be talking about Elite Eights, Final Fours, and championships when it comes to Kentucky. So nice first season there at Kentucky. When he came into difficult situation with Calipari leaving, which in this day and age, whenever a coach leaves, that blows up a team. So Kentucky had a little bit of attrition there, but he did a nice job in the portal, did a nice job in his first season. Now it's time to build on that, right? Now he's established his culture, needs to establish it even more in year 2, needs to get the right players under him, and eventually needs to start making Final Fours and championships, because if you don't, you will not last long at Kentucky. Just ask Billy Gillispie.
Yeah, or even Cal, who did a lot of that early in his career, stumbled later on in terms of success in March. And although he was not fired, I think he was, gladly shown the door when an opportunity arose, and they did not try to keep him there. So yeah, that's the Sweet 16. I mean, here's all the games. I think the last 2 we want to hit on, obviously, are Alabama and Arkansas. So we'll start with Alabama because I think the Arkansas one might warrant a little bit longer of a discussion. The Alabama one was a phenomenal game, of course, and the reason it maybe just doesn't warrant as long of a discussion is because it was a blowout. I mean, Alabama hits a record. I don't know if it was like college basketball record or just within the scope of the tournament, like a March Madness record, but 25 threes, go 25 out of 51 from downtown. They could have won that game without making a 2-point field goal if you add up their 3-point field goals and then free throws, that would have been enough to beat BYU, which is just stupid. But, that's kind of how Alabama plays, right? I think Nate Oates, much to his credit, he's done a fantastic job. I mean, he's big on the analytics. They take a ton of threes and they take a ton of layups. They don't really mess around with the mid-range game. He's very open about that, about the style of basketball that they want to play. They like to run, they like to shoot a lot, and they like to shoot a lot of threes. And they were just going in this game. Mark Sears had 10 on his own, scoring 34 points. Any big takeaways from that game? I mean, other than it was fun to watch.
Not really, other than to say that, it was fun to watch. It was fun to see Alabama go bombs away and, put up that many points and that many threes in a game. It was kind of funny going into, jumping ahead just shortly to the Elite Eight, in that our good friend Jake Thomas of Tide Talk Live and of SEC After Dark, who we do the show with every week, he mentioned it in our chat that once the Elite Eight came around and Alabama went a bit cold, which we'll talk about later, he said something like, we should have saved our threes, and he was kind of right. I'm watching this game and I'm just like, okay, wow, this is awesome. This is great for Alabama getting, you're going to get to the Elite Eight by going bombs away like this. But you see that happen often, in basketball. It's such a streaky game in that, shooters go hot and shooters go cold. And it's, hey, you're going to take them while you can get them, right? But that you're just hoping that you can sustain some of that momentum and keep that hot hand going into that next round of the NCAA tournament. And while it's happening, you got to feel good about it, but you also have to understand that, hey, it's probably not going to look like that again. And against Duke, that's kind of what happened. Although Duke is a different story, which we can touch on once we get to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated to see, again, I think Nate Oates, I mean, he's taken Alabama basketball to heights that they're really have never experienced before. So I certainly don't think that, he needs to change up what he's doing to coach. But my one sort of, thought on that style of we're going to run and gun and take a ton of threes is kind of what you brought up of sometimes you're going to get cold. And unlike the NBA where you're playing 7-game series, it's one and done, man. And if you get cold in the NCAA tournament, one time you're done, most likely, unless you can pull a rabbit out of your hat and figure out a different way to win a ball game. And as you said, when they ran into Duke and they got a little cold, they could not. So I guess I just bring that up because I think it's an interesting way to play, especially in college basketball, when the tournament is so, for lack of a better word, fluky. And if you're cold, you can get got. And that's just not the case in the NBA. I could be wrong here, but it does seem like the teams that not just make it to the Final Four, because Bama has done that, but like actually win a national title are a little more balanced, a little more inside-out game than just letting it fly from deep. But, if I'm wrong and somebody's won a title in the last decade playing that kind of style, let me know. But just something to think about on that. And then, the last game we can touch on here in the Sweet 16 is the Arkansas collapse. So, in case you missed this one, Arkansas was up 13 points. I think it was 69-56 with 5 minutes remaining. And then from there, man, it was all the Red Raiders. They climbed back to within 3. I think it was 72-69. And then Tech hit that. I think his name was Williams for Tech, kind of I don't even know how to describe him. He was fun to watch, just a big body guy. Honestly looked like slow, but could kind of get anywhere he wanted on the floor. He was backing guys down. And then he buries a 3 to tie the ball game with 9 seconds left. Arkansas doesn't make their last second attempt. Game goes to overtime. And to Arkansas's credit, they battled in overtime, but ultimately fell to the Red Raiders. What were your takeaways on that one? I mean, we talked about Cal sort of not getting it done in March at Kentucky, and this was, although very different scenario. Arkansas is not Kentucky; he's in his first year, but disappointing way to end the season when you feel like you got an Elite Eight ticket punched, and then you just get beat over the head with a comeback right at the last second.
Man, it's tough. I mean, this one's fascinating because you had Arkansas, right, blows it, and then Texas Tech turns around and blows it in the Elite Eight against Florida, right? And it's just a couple days later, or 2 days later. So I do think it was a tough one for Cal and Arkansas for sure. I mean, hey, you got to give your hats off to John L. Davis, 30 points. 11 of 11 from the free throw line down the stretch. If I remember right, Arkansas had some trouble at the free throw line, which is really kind of what cost them, not all of it, but it definitely did not help for them winning the game. And the other thing I just wanted to point out here is that, I'm looking at, I should have put this on a graphic here, but Arkansas, there's multiple times on the ESPN win probability, the graph that shows it. And Arkansas, there was multiple points in the second half where they were above 90% chance to win the game. They were at 98% chance to win the game early in the second half. And then with 10 minutes to go, and then they were at, I think the highest from there was 96.7% with 4 minutes and 40 seconds to go in the second half. And then the graph just goes straight down, and Texas Tech made a comeback. So you got to credit Texas Tech. They played they played a heck of a ball game in order to make that comeback, and they never gave up, right? They just kept coming. And that's what they did against Florida as well, up until the last couple minutes too, until they collapsed with less than that, 3 minutes to go actually. So it was a really fun game to watch. Loved it. Also, speaking of Kentucky, right? Mark Pope, you got to be, happy, I guess, right, with this first season. You make a Sweet 16. On the other side, right, folks are always going to be comparing now Mark Pope and Cal and how their careers go in the next 5 years, say, for as long as either of them are at Kentucky and Arkansas. And at Arkansas, you got to be happy with what Cal did this year. I mean, if you're an Arkansas fan looking at this, hey, yeah, sure, you don't want to lose to Texas Tech. You feel like you got an Elite Eight ticket punched in year one, which would be incredible considering where this team was mid-year, considering they lost their leading scorer, this super freshman mid-year who eventually was able to come back and play a little bit. But I think if you're an Arkansas fan, you got to be happy with where Cal has this program. Year one, you make a Sweet 16. You are this close to making an Elite Eight. And you can only build from there, right? You got a Hall of Fame coach now on your sidelines. You got to feel great about where the Arkansas program is and where they're heading.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think too, when you talk about comparison, one thing that's worth bringing up is, not only did the way Cal leave Kentucky was a little bit, odd, I would say. So was the way that Musselman left Arkansas, because that was another situation where things just seemed like they kind of soured, and he ends up taking the USC job, which is a very strange move. And they didn't even make the tournament. They're in the NIT, I think. So if you're into,
congrats.
Yeah, if you're into the NIT, you can watch the Must Bus and USC play. But Arkansas has to be feeling good about their season. The hire, Coach Cal, of course. I think they're on the up and up. Well, we might as well get into the Elite Eight now. We kind of brought up, Texas Tech and how the script was flipped on them. So here's obviously the matchups and the scores. You had Auburn taking out Michigan State by 6. Duke blew out Alabama, and Houston kind of blew out Tennessee as well. But that Florida-Texas Tech game really made, the whole Elite Eight slate worthwhile, because exactly what you brought up, the script was completely flipped on Texas Tech, where they really had Florida. And as a matter of fact, I specifically remember watching that game, and when it started getting down, around that 5-minute mark, I almost texted you. I held off, but I was like, Tech is going to do this because they're not the type of team, they are a good team. They're disciplined. They have talent. Like, they're not going to let a team come back with this little time left. They're just going to, squeeze the air out of the ball and finish off Florida. And before I texted you that, I want to say his name is like Huff or Haw, but it sounded like the commentators were saying Hop. Did you hear that? But it's Haugh or whatever, the tall kind of blonde kid from Florida. He buries a three. So they're down at the time 9 points, I think, with like 2 minutes and 51 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
And then that guy hits back-to-back threes. And then, not to be outdone, Walter Clayton turns around and hits back-to-back threes. So they hit 4 consecutive threes, I think on 4 consecutive possessions.
4 consecutive, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And immediately flipped the script, go on a 12-2 run. And once they got in the lead, Florida hit their free throws. Matter of fact, they were 25 out of 27 on the night. So as soon as they got that lead late in the game, it was just like, all right, it's the Steph Curry good night, because Walter Clayton's not missing from the line. This Florida team is good. And that was just a hell of a comeback by the Gators when I really thought that they were probably dead.
Yeah, I thought they were done, frankly. 2:50 left. You're down by 9. I was kind of on the edge of my seat still, because I know it's Florida. And, full disclosure, I picked the Gators to win. I've done absolutely terrible in every other piece of the bracket. So don't think that I'm going to win any of my March Madness, my money back. But I picked the Gators to win. And so I was kind of on the edge of my seat, like, I think this is the best team in the country, and you've got Texas Tech in here about to take them out. Like, we haven't seen a lot of big upsets in this tournament, and I know Texas Tech is a 3 seed. Like, they're a very good team. But this, to me, would have been probably the biggest upset of the tournament since Arkansas, wasn't able to get to the Elite Eight. Just because of Florida, right, winning the SEC, the deepest league in the country, the deepest league ever in terms of teams that got into the SEC or into the NCAA tournament. And then, Florida, I just thought was kind of a team of destiny to the national championship. They still might be at this point, but it's because of Walter Clayton Jr. and those threes that they were able to hit at the end. They took a page out of Alabama's book. Alabama went cold, and then Florida said, "Oh, we'll get hot at least in these last 3 minutes of this game," and we're able to overcome, what looked like it was going to be a pretty devastating loss. And it was the same thing. I'm looking at the win probability. Texas Tech's win probability is like it's like 90-something%, and then it just drops off a cliff after they start hitting the threes. And I'm watching that game. I really started paying attention to the game with the last eight or so minutes left. And it was just wild to watch. I mean, I just sat with my jaw, on the floor. I saw the first three, was like, oh boy, like, okay, this one's not over. And then bam, 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 it's just 3 after 3, just bombs away for them to tie it up and then eventually win the game. And like you said, hit their free throws down the stretch. I knew that there was a serious problem for Texas Tech. They had to call timeout, I think after maybe like the second 3. And you could just tell, it's like, okay, you're on your heels, right? You got the lead still, but you're on your heels. And so they were down by 3. Florida was down by 3. I think Texas Tech called a timeout. And you're just thinking to yourself, you've been in those situations, right? Even if you didn't play college ball or anything like that. I played high school basketball. So I've been in those situations where you're kind of on the ropes, and you get a little shaky, right? Like, you're just hoping, like, okay, let's take the air out of the ball, like you said, and didn't matter. Those threes that they were hitting were ridiculous, right? Like, if I'm Texas Tech, I would let those guys take that 3 almost 10 out of 10 times. Like, good luck, They were hitting them from crazy angles. Walter Clayton Jr.'s, doing a fadeaway. Like, that was a really fun game to watch, and that's why you watch, March Madness. That's why March Madness is fun. It's for games like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to sort of close this out, I think, before we can touch on some other games, but Walter Clayton, he saved them twice now. I mean, in that UConn game, they don't win that without him either. So heck of a pickup in the transfer portal for Golden to get Clayton. And that guy, I mean, there's a lot of fun guys to watch in this tournament, but that guy is probably number one for me, just the way he just takes over at the end of the game, and he has no fear. I mean, the shots he hit against UConn, and then in this one, I mean, the one where he dribbles back, after somebody put up a shot, Florida gets an offensive rebound. I think it came down to him, and he just dribbles like twice, backs up to the 3-point line. He knew as soon as he got the ball, he knew I'm shooting, but I'm going to have to get behind the 3-point line before I shoot. So he just takes the ball, dribbles back, and then, turns around, fires good. And it's just pandemonium. Everybody's going nuts. And like you said, you just knew, you're like, oh no, this is not going to be good for Texas Tech. They can't, there's no defense to stop that. So
no, exactly. And momentum is so real in sports, right? And especially when it comes to the NCAA tournament, momentum matters so much. And okay, even if you're down by a couple points, right? Okay, we're only down by 3. Well, we've just hit 3. We're going to go down and we're just going to put another one in your eye. Just momentum's a big deal. And it really showed in that game.
Yeah, for sure. So just looking around the other matchups, I don't know what you wanted to hit on. To be honest, I didn't watch much of the Tennessee-Houston game because it got pretty ugly early. And Houston kind of just suffocated them. I mean, I am excited for the Final Four because I genuinely think any of these 4 teams could win. I mean, Duke is phenomenal. Florida, as we just mentioned, phenomenal. Auburn has been phenomenal all year. There's a reason they're the 1 overall seed. And Houston, I mean, they've been a great program really since Sampson got there, but they're suffocating on defense. They've got good players. I mean, they had a scare against Purdue. They figured it out down the stretch, right? Made some clutch shots. So they're tested. And I don't know, did you get much eyes on that game? I was watching a little bit early and just thought this is going to get ugly and kind of checked out.
Yeah, I watched it. But truth be told, I was on SEC Twitter the whole time, just messing around because it got out of hand, and which is unfortunate because, this is kind of the one thing I wanted to say about that game is, Rick Barnes, man, like, he has these good teams. The guy can recruit. He's got a good culture. Like, he puts together good teams, and for whatever reason, he just can't get over the hump. I mean, I'd have to look back and see, has he made an Elite 8 at Tennessee? I should have done a little more of my research before.
I'll look this up in the background, only to say I think he has made an Elite 8. I mean, for him. For him in particular, it's the Final Four that's, he made one time at Texas 20 years ago.
Right. So he made the Elite 8 this year, right? So he's got the Elite 8 this year at Tennessee. But I don't think, he hasn't made a Final Four. I'm sorry?
They made the Elite 8 last year as well. So he's got back-to-back Elite 8s.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think last year was really the year. I mean, this team was phenomenal, but I do think there's not many people that would say that they were a better team than Houston. Not to say they couldn't have won that game, but, let's say in a 7-game series, most people are going to be taking Houston in that. But last year, man, Dalton Connect was a baller. Like,
yeah,
I'm with you. It's phenomenal. Back-to-back Elite 8s, right? You shouldn't be complaining about it, but it is tough to see a guy like that just, like you said, just I don't know what it is, but in March he's good, but not great.
Good, not great. That's right. I mean, I think the only Final Four under his belt is the TJ Ford one, which was in like 2002 with Texas. So I don't know that there's a more accomplished, unaccomplished coach, if that makes sense, than Rick Barnes, because if you look at the guy's resume, it's pretty incredible. He's got an amazing resume in terms of his record, in terms of the teams he's coached, tournament appearances, conference titles. Like, the guy's done it all except for get over the hump, continuously go to Final Fours, get to the Tom Izzo level, right, of going to Final Fours. Lute Olson, like, he's just sitting there in tier B of all-time coaches and been knocking on the door forever, and he just can't get over the hump. And it's yet another year, another blown opportunity to get to a Final Four. He's just not able to do it. So we'll see what he does. I don't think he's back-to-back Elite 8s. He's not in danger of getting fired. He's going to keep knocking on the door there at Tennessee. They're going to continue to be good. But I did think it was unfortunate, and I didn't expect him to get blown out that badly by Houston. Let's put it that way. I know Houston's a good team. I agree they're the better team, but to see Tennessee kind of fold up like that in the Elite 8, that's not what I expected out of them. So,
Yeah, I would agree. Speaking of folding up, we've sort of touched on it. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong graphic. But Bama, as we said, just kind of got cold. I think, again, you're sort of playing with fire when you've only got one game eliminates you in a tournament like this to play that style, and unfortunately, they got burned. I do think part of that is certainly there was a regression to the mean from the BYU game where, hey, you're not going to hit 25 threes or 50% every single night. But
Yep.
a lot of that credit, I think, belongs to Duke as well, because they are good. And you and I were talking about this pre-show. They're giants. I think every guy they run out there in their starting five is 6'5" or bigger. I mean, obviously, Cooper Flagg is, he's tall, 6'10" or something. That Knipple guy's like 6'7". Sion James, their guard, I think is 6'5". The African center, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I mean, he's a giant 7-footer. So they're just long. And if your game is, trying to run up and down and shoot a bunch of open threes, like, that's tough to do against a team that's that long. And, on the flip side, it's not just like they're good at defense. All those dudes are extremely skilled with the basketball, can play offense. So when you're going to have to score 80 to 90 points minimum to stay with Duke, it just puts a lot of pressure on you as an offense, and Bama, couldn't hang. And Mark Sears is unfortunate because he's been such a great player for them for years. He had the amazing game in the Sweet 16. He was kind of nowhere to be found. I mean, I think the height really got to him as someone who's not that tall himself. He just looked totally out of sorts in that one.
Yeah, he did. Unfortunate for Bama, but they got to be excited. I mean, hey, Nate Oates has this program just humming, just continually right there. Yeah, Rick and Bonnie. That's right, Rick. Bama's going to be back. If Nate Oates stays in Tuscaloosa for the long haul, Alabama is going to be a very good basketball team for a long time to come. He's a hell of a coach. So don't get too down about this one this year. I honestly, we'll get to this in a second about the Final Four here, but Duke is kind of looking like a team of destiny. This team is really, really freaking good. And like you said, very, very long, very tall, and just extremely talented, even though they're young. So, yeah, no, unfortunate for Bama, unfortunate. But, hey, the SEC getting two teams into the Final Four. We can probably segue to the Final Four here. Pretty dang impressive. Only one conference did it.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely impressive. And it's, we sound like broken records here in a sense, but it's just like they got a record number of teams into the tournament, and then they backed it up by getting a record number of teams into the Sweet 16. And, just sort of every step of the way here, it's like, dang, yeah, the conference has lived up to the billing as, split hairs here. But I think it's well, discussed and agreed upon at this point, especially with the skins on the wall from this tournament, that this was, one of the best years any individual conference has ever had. Again, if you want to, split hairs over the best or whatever, then have that conversation. But I think it's firmly, one of the best. And I think it's definitely in that conversation. So yeah, just an insane year for the SEC. What was it? 7 Sweet 16.
Yep.
4 Elite 8, 2 Final Four. I mean, just every step of the way. They had teams there, and it's unfortunate that Auburn and Florida are on the same side. I'm a little bit sad about that, because it would be awesome to have an all SEC final. Also, it would be awesome, not that this game will be any less fun. But Florida and Auburn have already played this year. Florida beat Auburn, I think it was back in February, 90 to 81.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a casual college basketball fan, like, I would much rather see, even if they both lose and no team, SEC team made it to the final, I would still rather see those teams go up against someone they haven't played and see, because we talked about it, like, all these teams can win. Houston looks great. Duke looks great. Auburn looks great. Florida looks great. Like, I would like to see them be on opposite sides go up against Houston from the Big 12, Duke from the ACC, and see who comes out on top. But fortunately, that's not the case. We got Auburn and Florida squaring off. Florida's, at least as of now, I think a 2.5-point favorite in that game. So not really surprising, but interesting nonetheless to see the top overall seed as a slight dog in that one. What are you looking for in that game?
How healthy is Janai Broome? That's my question. I wonder if Vegas has given those 2 points. And I know I'm sure I haven't read anything. I didn't see if you put anything in the newsletter on that today, but
no.
No. So we'll see. He looked like he came back in the game. We saw him. He had a 3, right? But he was definitely favoring that elbow near the end of that game. And I know that he also, looked like maybe like a high ankle issue as well, kind of based on the way that he landed. I think he's going to be fine if I had to guess, but I wonder if Florida's getting now 2 points is pretty small spread there, but I wonder if they're giving Florida that 2 points because we're wondering about is Janai Broome going to be 100%? Because if he's not, then definitely I give the edge to Florida. I think that's going to be a really great game. We got this close too, right? Except for, we got a couple blowouts. But we were on the verge of having an all SEC Final Four, which another what if, but that's pretty impressive in and of itself, just having it literally on the verge of having an all SEC Final Four. My question to you on this one is, all these teams look really strong coming into the Final Four. Who do you think is the most vulnerable, and then also like the favorite here in your eyes to win it? Taking out, who you picked to win it necessarily, but just, okay, we've made it to the Final Four here, throw everything out. Who's the most vulnerable, and then who do you think is the favorite here in your eyes?
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment from before. I think Duke is probably the favorite. They have just really looked the part. Their closest game was actually Arizona in the Sweet 16, and I watched most of that game. That was 99% Caleb Love, the former Tar Heel to Arizona transfer. He had like 35 plus in that game. So Duke played fantastic. They just went up against a guy who was hot and they couldn't quite stop him. But even that game never really felt in doubt. In terms of vulnerable, I would probably lean Houston there. Admittedly, I've watched them the least out of these teams, especially with Auburn and Florida being in the SEC. But I also think that they have had, all things considered, a fairly easy road. Purdue, I don't think was that good this year. Purdue gave them some trouble. And then I think Tennessee was really good, but I'm just going to chalk that up to as a bad matchup. And, somebody who knows more about college basketball or even basketball than me, feel free to, refute me on that. But I'm just going to say that, again, maybe similar to kind of the Duke thing, like Zakai Ziegler, he's not that big. Houston's tall, long, like they were just better. And Gonzaga is a decent team, but very down this year. So I think they had a pretty easy road relative to some of the other ones where, I think Auburn was tested. I mean, Michigan won the Big Ten. Michigan State won the Big Ten regular season. Like they went up against some big dogs. Duke, I think, going up against Alabama, Arizona, Baylor is a established brand. So I would lean Houston there, but again, that might just be my ignorance for having not watched a ton of Cougar basketball.
I think I would tend to agree with you there. Just to go, I mean, I do agree with you on Duke. I think looking at the tournament, to me, it's pretty obvious that Duke is the favorite at this point, just based on, I mean, they're smoking fools. Like their first round game, right? Okay, you played Mount St. Mary's, 93-49. Round of 32, Duke beats Baylor 89-66. Sweet 16, Duke over Arizona 100-93, and then they beat Alabama by 20 in the Elite Eight.
Yeah,
I mean they're ripping through it. Versus the other ones we've seen, right? Okay, let's look at the other Final Four teams we've got here. Florida had a very difficult game against UConn. UConn, defending national champs, I get it. Like, hey, I know they lost some stuff. Like, it's not the same team. 8 seed. They were going to be a tough out no matter what. Still, beat them by 2 and kind of needed a miracle. And then you had to make that comeback against Texas Tech, right, in order to win. Texas Tech had you on the ropes. And then going over to Houston, you went through Houston. So Houston had trouble with Purdue. And Auburn had a pretty good tournament overall. They played kind of closer games once you got to like Michigan, although they pulled away late. Like a lot of them was like pulled away late. You know what I mean? It was okay. These games are, you should watch this game. Who knows? Auburn could lose, but would pull away, kind of mid to late in the second half. But Duke just looks like, kind of like I said at the outset of the show, they kind of look like the team of destiny right now. Cooper Flagg is playing off the charts. This team is extremely gifted and talented, and so I'm looking at Duke probably to take it home. And then in terms of the one that's most vulnerable, I actually might go Florida or Auburn here. I think I'd go Florida, honestly. Just looking at what I just went through, right? Like they've had a couple of these hiccups here that I actually would not have expected out of them. Like I said, I picked them to win in my brackets. And so I was just a little bit surprised. I thought that they were going to smoke fools like Duke has been smoking fools. Right. Winning by 20, win by 15, like pretty comfortable wins. Maybe have a little, one scare here that happens in the tournament. But we're now here at two pretty good scares when it comes to UConn and Texas Tech. So in terms of most vulnerable, I might say it's Florida. If you want to play devil's advocate and go Auburn, it's from what I said about Janai Broome. If Janai Broome is not fully 100%, I think it's easily Auburn that's the most vulnerable now in the Final Four.
Yeah, and one thing too, I want to just shout out this guy because I have enjoyed the heck out of watching him. Is Tahad Pettiford for Auburn?
Yeah,
he's a freshman. He comes off the bench, but holy cow, is he fast, man. He will just the stuff he was doing to the 2 big men in the Michigan game, those 2 big white 7-footers that Michigan had, anytime they would switch onto him, dude, he would just, just leave him in the dust. It was a thing of beauty to watch that kid, a true freshman in a, big time moment, just be like, just recognize that I got the matchup, boom, blow by, go into the hoop. And he's hit some big threes too. He's not afraid to jack it up from downtown. So I've been enjoying watching him come off the bench as just a guy who is fun to watch. He's a ton of energy off the bench. So I'm excited to see him in that Florida game. And I think one thing I do think about all these Final Four matchups to kind of close us out here is, as we've talked about, I think anybody can beat anybody. And I think a big part of that is because I think all these teams that are left are balanced in the sense that they have a lot of different guys that can score. And they're like, it's kind of counterintuitive, but they're balanced. They have a lot of guys that can score, but they also have 1 or 2 guys that can like really score, so you've got Janai Broome. He could go for 30 and just put Auburn on his back and get him to the title game. Walter Clayton has already done that multiple times. He could do that. They could beat Auburn. They could beat anybody, Duke, multiple guys, Cooper Flagg, Knipple, and then Houston has LJ Cryer. They've got, I think, 3 guys that shoot 40% beyond the arc. So like all these teams are, for lack of a better term, like they have multiple guys on their rosters that in a 1-game elimination game, like could just powder keg blow up and, boom, they're going to win because this guy just went 6 of 8 from 3 and couldn't miss.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on the Final Four for the men's, at least, we'll get to the women's here later in the show and touch on that quickly, but is – if you get an 8 seed, right, or a 10, or we've seen 11 seeds, make the Final Four, a lot of times the steam runs out, right? Like how many times do those guys make the national championship game? Very, very seldom do they. A lot of times you get a blowout in the Final Four when those guys make it, they run out of steam, and, one of the blue bloods ends up ends up finally clipping them. Though I love to see upsets and I love to see Cinderellas and Final Four runs from those, with all number one seeds, you're getting the best of the best, right? Like these are the 4 best teams in the country. So expect to see fantastic basketball games. Get your popcorn ready. It's going to be close basketball. It's going to be physical, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to these games in the Alamo Dome.
Yeah, likewise. Well, yeah, I think the next thing we can touch on here is the coaching carousel. But before we do, we are brought to you by the Steer Agency. So again, I'm going to ad-lib this a little bit to talk about March Madness, but basketball is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you're dialing up the perfect inbounds play as the clock is running out or looking to dominate public affairs, PR, or digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies that get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. So shout out to the Steer Agency. Appreciate the support. And the coaching carousel. So obviously Buzz is heading to Maryland. I will let viewer Michael Specs lead us in here. Hopefully you're still watching. I know you left these comments earlier, but he's asking who's going to coach A&M. And then he has a very timely suggestion that we being A&M, but the A&M hire Wimp Sanderson, the former Alabama coach from 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I think he's still alive, but I don't know if that would be a great hire for the Aggies. But I'll kick it to you here. Thoughts on Buzz leaving? Thoughts on the potential new hire? Where's your head at?
Yeah, so we can bring up this graphic here just to kind of set the stage. But you got Buzz heading out of the SEC, and I know Auburn fans are extremely excited to hear that because for whatever reason, Buzz has owned the Tigers on the Plains, beat them when they were number 1 this year, and also beat them in the SEC tournament in 2022 when they were number 4 in the country. So for whatever reason, he has had Bruce Pearl's number. But all that to say, on the left here, you can see that is everything from Texas A&M. So 120 and 73, 622 winning percentage. In conference, he was 55 and 44, 560 winning percentage. 3 straight NCAA tournament bursts now at Texas A&M. And then over the course of his 6-year tenure at A&M, he had 6 top 10 wins. So, overall, like a pretty good resume at A&M. And then on the right, you can see that's just overall. So that's all of his years, whether it was at Marquette or at Virginia Tech or at A&M. And then he also had a 1-year stop at New Orleans before he was at Marquette. So he's got a pretty good record, pretty good overall coach. He did a decent job at A&M. I have trouble with this one. I think that it was, you hear this out of A&M is that it was just kind of time, and it was time to move on. And the fan base was a little upset with Buzz. I think that they, first of all, expected more. Buzz having made an Elite Eight, having won a conference title at Marquette, and all of the NCAA appearances. I think 3 Sweet 16s was on that graphic. They expected to make Sweet 16s. A&M expected to make Elite Eights. They expected to have a program that achieved more than they did under Buzz. And so I think that with that and just how Buzz is, like he's not for everybody. I personally thought that he fit in very well with the A&M culture from a lot of different respects. I wanted him to be the coach at A&M for 10 years, 15 years, and had he been that, I think that he probably would have achieved the level of success that A&M fans were looking for. But at the end of the day, it sounds like the more that's coming out about this is, and I don't even fault Buzz for this. Like it sounds like he was kind of, looking around a lot over the last couple of years. And I think that can be attributed to a lot of things. One is that I think, we talked about this yesterday or pre-show. 3rd AD now that he's on, right? Like he was hired by Scott Woodard you could even mention 4 if we talk about interim ADs. So he was
Right.
hired by Scott Woodard. Then it went to Ross Bjork, and now we're at Trev Alberts. So there has been a lot of turnover in the athletic department for A&M since Buzz arrived there. That's hard for anybody when your boss continually turns over. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. And he was brought there with, certain ideals in mind and how the department was going to run under Scott Woodward. And then it changed continuously over his 6 years there. So I think he was looking for a little bit more stability. And I think on the A&M side, folks were just kind of done with it, in terms of he's always looking around. And now it's like pretty egregious. Like the reports are now that he was even contacting Maryland before Willard had taken the job at Villanova. And so, at the end of the day, sounds like it was just the right time for everybody to move on. And we'll see. I wish him the best. I hope that Buzz does well at Maryland. I think he will. I think with the resources Maryland has, with the focus and the attention on Maryland basketball, because that is a traditional basketball school, that he will have a lot of success there, as did former A&M coach Mark Turgeon, who did the same thing and went to Maryland years ago. He had pretty good success at Maryland as well. Maryland ran him off because he didn't achieve the level of success that they had hoped. But overall, I think Buzz will do a good job there. So what are your thoughts on it?
I think you summed it up pretty well there. I mean, the only things I will add is in terms of Buzz looking around, I certainly think that was rubbing A&M people the wrong way. Especially as you mentioned, a newer athletic director who doesn't know him that well, right? Trev Alberts gets hired around this time last year, I believe. And so he's known Buzz for a year. How would you feel if one of your, highest ranking employees that was under you was looking around? Probably not great. So when you don't have a relationship that goes back years to have an open discussion or even understand where he's coming from, I can see why A&M fans or people within the department are kind of like, okay, buddy, if you don't want to be here, then move on. Yeah. But then from Buzz's perspective, I think he brought up all the key points there. It was probably, I don't blame him for trying to move on or looking around. But this is also kind of his playbook. I don't really understand exactly why. Maybe it is what you brought up about, he's just a different cat. And so he wears out his welcome or something. But he was at Marquette for 6 years, jumps to Virginia Tech. Seems like kind of a lateral move. He's at Virginia Tech for 5 years, jumps to A&M. Seems like kind of a lateral move. This is probably his biggest step up in a sense. I mean, Maryland has not been great for quite a while, but you brought up, they're definitely a traditional basketball school. And I don't think, even the most ardent of A&M fan would sit here and say that A&M basketball is a better job than Maryland. It's not. So, good for Buzz, I guess, right? He got a better job that he thinks is a better situation, and his current situation was kind of fizzling out. So he did what he had to do. I don't begrudge him at all. I'm interested to see though where A&M goes, because we brought up the turmoil of ADs and all this, and look, Trev Alberts comes over from Nebraska last spring, gets blindsided by the Schlossnagel news, hires Mike Early returns, no pun intended, have been horrendous. So I don't blame Alberts really for that hire. Again, like, he was blindsided. That whole situation is sort of a standalone, like, if it was a mistake, then, okay. But it's not like they had a big search and were like, all right, this is the guy. It was kind of a scramble, mad dash. After you just lost in the College World Series final, Game 3, everybody else, all the coaching carousel's been done. You got stars on your team saying they want Early, like, whatever. That aside, this is a big hire for him. He did not hire Elko. He's new on the job. And I think, as evidenced by kind of how Aggie fans were treating Buzz, whether it's realistic or not, A&M fans want to be good at basketball. It's never really happened for an extended period of time, but, they care. So if he makes a bad hire, people will be turning their, guns or swords or whatever Alberts, right, and saying, hold on here, you hired early and then you hired this bum to replace Buzz. Like, what's going on here? So I think it's a pretty consequential hire for Alberts to get right. And unfortunately, as we've seen at A&M, not just with Buzz, but with Billy Gillispie, with Mark Turgeon, there's a good chance if he gets it right, he's going to have to make a hire in another couple of years. And that's just kind of the reality of where the A&M basketball program is. Maybe you get lucky and land somebody like a Nate Oates, who seems to be plugged in at Bama and happy and going to stay, or even a Bruce Pearl at Auburn. Like, Auburn basketball has not been anything to write home about before him, but he's been there 11 years now. He's happy. So maybe you land one of those guys, or maybe you land a guy like Billy Gillispie who jumps for a blue blood job. So, but either way, it's a consequential hire.
Yeah, big hire coming up. One name to watch, I think, is Fred Hoiberg. The guy's had a lot of success in his previous stops, not the NBA, not counting the NBA, but in college basketball, he did a great job at Iowa State, if I remember right. He was at Iowa State for a couple of years and did very well there. And he's at Nebraska now, and he was hired by Trev Alberts at Nebraska. So he's one to watch. So folks know there was breaking news before the show that Chris Beard, he turned down. The A&M gave him a big offer, apparently, with a big NIL package, and he turned it down and took more money, took an extension and a raise from Ole Miss. So he's off the board. A couple other names to keep an eye on are Chris Jans from Mississippi State, Grant McCaslin from Texas Tech. And then it kind of goes down into the mid-majors and others. Somebody mentioned Greg McDermott from Creighton. Very interesting name. And then Alan Huss from High Point, who's getting a lot of buzz because of what High Point has been doing in the last couple of years. Brad Underwood at Illinois is another name that surfaced. And then there's a couple others like Scott Cross at Troy at the mid-major level, and Bucky McMillan from Samford are a couple names I've seen. So anyway, like you said, it's a very big hire. He may be having to make another big hire at the end of this season. I do not want to say that Michael Early is going to get fired. I actually really like Michael Early in terms of being a man. It just hasn't been great this season. And with the roster that is one of the most talented in college baseball and the way that it's performing, you may just not have a choice, especially with the fan base. The fan base is about ready to riot. So, big hire here in terms of basketball, but A&M's going to have money. Everybody knows A&M's got money. A&M is going to be able to pay a coach, and maybe they'll be able to make a big hire. We'll see. My ear will be to the ground. And I think I had one totally out of left field, and this is based on zero information, but talking before the show with Hammer, why not throw a bunch of money at Kelvin Sampson? The guy has been at Houston for a long time now. He has done a very good job at Houston, and Houston sees themselves as a basketball school. They've had success in the past in basketball. He's in the Final Four right now. Do you wait like a week to see? If I'm A&M, I'm calling him, and I'm offering him a lot of money and a big NIL package. Houston at this point has some big donors, Tillman Fertitta, who can probably match something like that, so it may not matter. But at the end of the day, that's one of my main calls if I'm Trev Alberts.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely make that call. He's right down the road. I think, I mean, I know that's your sort of stars in the sky hire, as I kind of think Chris Beard was. When that broke before, I really wasn't surprised. Like you said, we were kind of talking off air, and I know there's probably a lot of Ole Miss folks watching the show right now, thanks to our buddy Stephen Willis, and he'll break this down better than we could because he, is a lot more familiar with Beard and that whole situation. But, I just look at it as like, yeah, sure, A&M has a ton of money. Great. But, like, they're not going to pay a coach $15 million. So, like, a reasonable offer for a guy like Beard for a college basketball coach, like, Ole Miss is going to be able to match that, which they did, right? They got him his raise. Like, for Beard, win-win situation, right? We see college football coaches do this all the time. Float their name out there, get a raise, so I'm not surprised that he wouldn't take the job. I mean, he's got a good thing going at Ole Miss. They hired him, for lack of a better word, off the scrap heap. Like, hopefully he's got some loyalty there to that school. And again, you bring up the frenetic state of the A&M athletic department, churning through ADs. I mean, hopefully Alberts is here for a long time, but we don't know. He's not long tenured at the moment. So from Beard's perspective, he's like, dude, I got a good thing going at Ole Miss. They're much more stable in every sport, really. Football, basketball, baseball. You don't need to come to A&M. So I was not surprised that he turned us down and ergo parlay that into a raise, at Ole Miss. I think that was probably what he was trying to do the entire time. And by the way, I know he probably hates Texas because of how things went down there, but he did graduate from Texas. So the guy's basically hated A&M his entire life. He's not going to come coach A&M.
Yeah, coached at Texas Tech, Texas grad, coached at Texas. It would have been a weird marriage. And also all the self-righteous A&M fans, were already kind of up in arms about, I think Chris Beard may be a dirtbag. I don't know. I don't know the actual details of that case and what actually happened, but you already had A&M fans I'll never root for the A&M basketball program. So you might have had a whole Mark Stoops situation, if they hired Chris Beard. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. But one other name to watch out for, I don't know if folks saw this, but Lane Kiffin is he's a top target, and word on the street is that he has been angling through back channels to potentially be the next head basketball coach at Texas A&M. So, he just can't escape the rumors, and it's his own fault. He's just always in the middle of it.
He's always in the middle of it. And again, that guy knows how to play the game. His agent, right. Jimmy Sexton, knows how to play the game. That guy's gotten raises from Ole Miss, I think, twice already since he's been there. So he knows what this is all about. Chris Beard knows what this is all about. Even if you're not taking the job, darn right, my name's going to be floated out there in all the news outlets, and I'm going to get a raise out of it. So deservedly so. I'm not begrudging Beard at all for doing that. He took Ole Miss to a Sweet 16, darn near an Elite 8. So he's got a good thing going. All right, well, that's enough on the coaching carousel, I think, and plus we're already bumping up on an hour here, so we'll touch on the women's side before we get into our must-jam coach of the week. So on the women's side, SEC also doing a great job. 2 teams in the Final Four with South Carolina and University of Texas. I don't know if y'all saw the Vic Schaefer post-game interview. That's the Texas head coach, but that was good. He's crying, saying these girls mean the world to him. So really cool, to see an emotional coach after a big win like that, getting, not a traditional power either back, or I'm sure they've been there before at some point, but getting them to the Final Four. So good stuff there. I guess in this, so just to kind of recap a little bit, Texas beat Tennessee in the Sweet 16, 67-59, and then took down TCU 58-47 in the Elite Eight to get there. And then South Carolina beat Maryland 71-67, and then Duke 54-50 in the Elite Eight. Unfortunately, as you see the matchups here, we got the same conundrum we do on the men's side, where the 2 SEC teams that made it are squaring off against one another. So South Carolina and Texas will play Friday night at 5. South Carolina currently a 5.5-point favorite, and then they'll get the winner of the UCLA Bruins versus UConn matchup. Any quick thoughts on the women's side here before we move on to our must-champ coach of the week?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm certainly interested to watch South Carolina and Texas. We got those have been the 2 top teams in the SEC all year, and South Carolina looking to repeat to defend their title. And Texas beat them though earlier this year, so they split in the regular season, and then South Carolina topped them in the SEC title in the tournament. So that'll be a fun game to watch. I have a feeling that we're probably headed toward a rematch of South Carolina and UCLA from earlier in the season. And UCLA took down South Carolina by just a couple points, which is what catapulted them to number 1 in the country and the number 1 overall seed, because they they didn't run the table, but they got close to it. I think they lost late in the year to the University of Southern California. But anyway, that's kind of where I see this going. UConn's a great team. Don't get me wrong. UConn women's basketball. We all know Gino Auriemma and Paige Buchers is a baller as well. So they could get it done, but just kind of read the tea leaves and seeing how South Carolina and UCLA have played throughout the year and the way that South Carolina is playing right now. I think if I remember right, I have to look back, but they beat Texas by almost 20, I think, if not 20, in the SEC championship game. So I have a feeling that's where we're headed. But either way, it's going to be a fun Final Four in Tampa for the women.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be looking out for those semifinal matchups, and hopefully SEC can bring home another women's basketball title. Ideally with South Carolina. It's hard to root for Texas, but I'll do my best. I do like Vic Schaefer.
I do too. Almost our Muschamp Coach of the Week, but it kind of got topped by one that we've needed to show for a while. So I'll let you roll into that.
Yeah. So we'll close it out with our Muschamp Coach of the Week. We got a ton of people watching right now. If anybody's new here, hasn't been watching us since we started, the Muschamp Coach of the Week is an ode to Will Muschamp. Sort of an ironic one, but genuinely we love Will Muschamp because the guy's just a fool and a passionate fool who loves football. He's hard-nosed. He's emotional. Yeah, he screams. He's spit flying on the sideline. He's punching chalkboards. Yeah. Perhaps not a great head coach. However, his passion is hard. It's unrivaled almost. And so we
also loves his players.
Yeah.
Players. Yeah.
Right. So we just thought, hey, this is an SEC football show. Will Muschamp has entertained us for a very long time, and we wanted to give him a shout out. So basically we do this. Sometimes it's a legitimate, Kirby Smart telling the dogs that they're going to break everybody's neck at a halftime speech, passionate speech. And other times it's more of just a funny, all right, here's some coach saying something silly that we got a kick out of. That is like something we could see Muschamp saying as well. He probably has this exact viewpoint if I had to guess. So without further ado, we've got Rich Rodriguez, who's another guy that, you talk about like passion and kind of an interesting old school guy. He was giving his thoughts. It's a couple of weeks ago now. We've been slacking, but it's a couple of weeks ago. He's giving his thoughts on TikTok. So here's that clip.
Be on it, so I'm not banning them from. I just banning them from dancing on it. It's like, look, we try to have a hard edge, whatever, and you're in there, in your tights, dancing on TikTok. Ain't quite the image of our program that I want. If I'm allowed to do that, I guess I can have rules. Now, when they, like I said, 20 years from now, they want to be sitting in their pajamas in the basement, eating Cheetos and watching TikTok or whatever the hell, they can go at it, smoking cannabis, whatever. Knock yourself out. But, the hope or focus can be on winning football games. How about let's win the football game and not worry about winning the TikTok?
Quite a picture there, Coach. Our focus is more on who's winning.
Smoking cannabis and eating hot Cheetos, man. What are we doing?
I know. Let me just say, if you're a football coach out there and you refer to guys getting high as smoking cannabis, you're automatically going to be a candidate for Muschamp Coach of the Week because, I'm not in with all the trends either, but that is an old school term.
Yes, I'm just clipping that piece. Eating hot Cheetos and smoking your cannabis on the couch. I'm just clipping that. I'm going to use that very often. That is a good one. I definitely think also that Coach Muschamp completely believes that. There's been a lot of times that I have seen, we're doing the TikTok dances, right? And then it goes viral on Twitter with the recruit in your team's jersey, and the kid may not even commit to your school, but then this has happened to A&M a couple times, as you can tell. I've seen this before. It's happened to Georgia. I've seen it for multiple schools where it goes viral, where a kid is in your jersey. He does this little TikTok dance in the locker room. It goes viral, and everybody, says you're a bunch of losers for this kid doing a TikTok dance. So I am also in full support of Rich Rodriguez with his TikTok ban.
I am too. And I would say he's even being lenient, right? He says, I'm not saying they can't be on it. Just don't be dancing, right?
That's right.
We're here to focus on winning football games, and we need to have a hard edge. And you can't be in there dancing in your tights on TikTok and expect to win football games.
And eating hot Cheetos on your couch and smoking the cannabis.
Right.
So we're here to win football games. That's right.
Exactly. So, yeah, shout out Rich Rod. I mean, geez, that guy – I'm glad. I think it's awesome he's back at West Virginia. I think it'll be a fun storyline. And he, again, like
scumbag.
Yeah, scumbag, a hard ass. Like he's a character. So it'll be fun if he can rekindle the success that he had back in the day. With Pat White and Steve Slayton and all the like great. Some of my fondest memories, growing up was watching the West Virginia read option. Like that was
absolutely
must see TV. So it's been a long time. Rich Rod's been through a lot. The read option isn't quite as potent as it once was. So we'll see how he does. But one thing we do know, whether or not they're actually winning football games, his players won't be dancing on TikTok.
No, they won't. And little known fact, one of Bossman's screen names, one of my screen names on AOL AIM Messenger was, "Hey, I'm Pat White," because I loved Pat White, and that guy could play some football, man. That guy was electric back.
Yeah, I remember that username. The other thing I remember to throw it back to, our youth, whatever, I think it was NCAA football 07, perhaps. Either way, like everybody wanted to play with West Virginia. I mean, you, me, all our friends, we'd be over at each other's houses, smoking cannabis and eating Cheetos. And everyone's like, you're going to play NCAA football. And darn right, I'm trying to play with West Virginia, man. Like Pat White's a baller, Steve Slayton, Noel Devine. Like they had it rocking in Morgantown.
They definitely did. I was not smoking any cannabis, for the record.
No, we would have, I think, not to date myself here, but in 2007, I would have been 12. So I was certainly not smoking. I was not smoking any cannabis when I was 12 years old. But, playing football and hanging out in basements with your buddies, everyone wanted to play as West Virginia in NCAA football back in the day. So maybe we'll get back to that. The game's back. Rich Rod's back. I mean, what do they say in Knoxville? Feels like 98. Well, it feels like 07 right now in Morgantown. So hopefully they can find some of that magic in the Big 12.
I would love to see West Virginia back. I like it when West Virginia is good, probably because of that nostalgia and all those guys that came through there. They had, even Tavon Austin, man. They've got the greatest highlight tape of all time. Everybody on YouTube, man. They had a lot of great seasons there in West Virginia. So hopefully he can rekindle some of that magic.
Yeah. Tavon Austin and Cody Paul, the best highlight tapes of all time.
Yeah, that's the truth. We should feature him one week, no doubt.
Yeah, we should. We can we'll just play 5 minutes of Cody Paul highlights from like 2005 Pee Wee Pop Warner football.
Yeah, it is the off season, so yeah, for sure.
It is. That's a good point. We can do like a 30 for 30. Cody Paul. Where is he now?
Biscuits and SEC presents.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, look, y'all, we've taken up enough of your time. We're running over, and we're divulging into topics from 20 years ago that some of y'all probably have never even heard of in your life. So we'll spare you our nostalgic memories and just close out here. But thanks for tuning in. Again, we've got a big audience right now, so really appreciate the support. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, link down below. You can just go to our website. There'll be a pop-up. Please like the video, subscribe to YouTube, give us a follow on social media, just at Biscuits and SEC. And enjoy the upcoming baseball slate as well as the Final Four this weekend for men and women. It should be a great time.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Appreciate y'all. I'm Hammer, Boss Man. We're signing off. See y'all next week.